the New York Aikikai story is more character driven than it is plot driven. Discuss. I don't know. I thought that was a starting off point because I think what you'll, I think anybody looking at least back any amount of time, I think the thing that stands out are the individuals. You know, I don't think the dojo, the New York Aikikai, at least as far back as when we joined, which was, I believe we all came in 1974.
Right.
And, you know, it was kind of a wild place. A lot of diverse people. And after all, we came 10 years after the club was established. So, you know, it was already up and cooking by the time we got there. And, you know, I think there was, at least my recollection was that the makeup of the place was pretty interesting because you had, on the one hand, kind of a group, let's say they were from the martial arts world, or at least a lot of veterans from World War I or World War II. World War I. There actually, I think, was a guy there. But, you know, people who had served in the East in World War II and maybe the Korean War and had some exposure because, you know, I think even in Japan, Aikido was not like a household name in terms of martial arts. It was, you know, very, very esoteric martial art at the time. So, you know, to have heard about it, you would have probably had to been there and experienced it somehow, at least from the West here. So you had that group that is coming from their exposure to the martial arts, you know, in Japan after World War II. And then there was this whole other group, and guys jump in if you think I'm off the wall here, but then there were groups, let's say from the arts, from dance and theater, people who, let's say, were on the vanguard of new movements, physical disciplines that were coming out at the time. So we actually had a good number of people from theater, people from dance, musicians, and painters coming in. So, you know, it was never a homogenous group. And I'm going to leave it
left out, Steve.
Yeah.
Group you left out.
Yeah.
And I know you sort of touched on it with the theater and all the rest of it, but there was a whole ton of people who were interested in so-called New Age philosophy. You know, the age of Aquarius and stuff like that. People who thought by practicing a martial art or practicing yoga or changing their diet was going to get them Satori or Nirvana, what you will. And so there was a ton of people who thought that Aikido was one of those magic things which are going to get them to a new place in terms of, you know, fulfillment, let's put it that way. They just exaggerated the mystical parts and sort of left out a lot of the physical parts. Anyway.
No, I think that I think that's true. I think, you know, a lot of it was from, you know, Koichi Tohei's writing, and some of the demonstrations, you know, where he was, you know, the unbendable arm and holding a bunch of people there with one finger. You know, I mean, he was, you know, a significant martial artist, but I think that there were parts of the Aikido story that, as you say, appealed to a group that was looking for something more mystical, let's put it that way.
I mean, I'm a prime example. I don't want to, if I tell this story, I don't want you to look at me a little differently, like I'm really weird, but, I was sort of gorging myself for years on Japanese samurai films. And one time I came out of one of those theaters and I said, now I know what I want to be. I want to be a samurai. In my late 20s, you'd think I'd be much more, attuned to what people do in the real world, but I wanted to be a samurai. So I looked for some place where I could learn how to use a Japanese sword and found this little group, which was practicing Aikido at the 23rd Street Y, which is, as some people know, is 5 blocks from our dojo. And I was practicing. Most people who were in that group were kind of intellectuals. They were big on Japanese culture and stuff like that. Very much unsuited to a martial art, I thought. I consider myself one of them. But there were a few guys who were actually good, real martial artists. One of them was this guy, Carlos Rocky Rodriguez, who we all know, practiced Aikido also. And the other one that we know also was Harvey Genghis Khan, which is what his late wife Patty called him, Harvey Königsberg. And you want to say something, Steve?
No.
Well, just to continue the story, and then I'll let you guys tell your stories too. So we're in this Aikido class, and we were learning these new techniques, and Harvey was there when I got distracted, and instead of putting my sword into the scabbard, I put it into my arm. And in a way, it was like a samurai for the samurai movies because the blood burst out and stuff like that. But had nothing to do with Satori or anything like that, or being a samurai. In any case, they patched me up. I had surgery, and Harvey thought it would be a good time to introduce me to a more, hand-to-hand combat, or martial art, which was Aikido. Instead of, as I mentioned to you guys on other occasions, a hand to sword to arm martial art. So Harvey took me down to the New York Aikikai to see what it looked like. I actually recognized some people that I had known, from my neighborhood years ago. And it looked great. And I made it my New Year's resolution to join Aikido. And I did so on January 7th, the first Monday in 1974, January 7th, 1974. And take it from there, guys.
Peter, can we get a word in edgewise here?
I know I haven't been able to say anything, but I'll
Go ahead, Peter.
Up with my little story of how I started. I had, it was like a wild time, right? Because it was late 60s and 70s and all that. I was at Woodstock and my hair was down to my knees. I did every drug in the, imaginable. And I had gone to San Francisco, actually, and started Aikido there with an old student of Yamada Sensei, this guy, Mel Stewart. And it was a beautiful dojo on the 3rd floor, surrounded by windows, beautiful tatami mats. It was really a very beautiful dojo. So I had moved back to New York and knew about Yamada Sensei, and I was going to join the dojo. So I had kind of like straightened up by that time. I had cut my hair and, I had stopped smoking, and I really was going to do this Buddhist, become this enlightened child. And so I decided to go to the dojo, and I get my gi and I pack it up and I go down there, and I must have walked around for an hour trying to find the place, up and down the streets. It's supposed to be on 18th Street, for Christ's sake. And then finally there's this little tiny sign in the door. So I open the door and I hear this thumping and everything upstairs. I go walking up the doors and I walk into this place, and it was like the shabbiest thing that I could have imagined. It was like the mat was like looking kind of gray, and there were like these dirty streaks on the wall up from the garage that was down below. And all these people were there just like, I've never seen so many Aikido people together. They were having a seminar. And Kevin McKenzie comes up to me and says, "Hey, how are you? Who are you? Blah, blah. Oh, I'd like to join the dojo." Well, we're having a seminar today. Oh, well, I'd kind of like to join. And he says, well, come on in the back. I'll introduce you to sensei. So he takes me to the back through this little hallway into this back dingy room that is just covered in smoke. I mean, you could hardly see anything in it. And there's these 4 Japanese guys sitting around this table with a bottle of scotch. And they're all smoking. It was Kanai sensei and Yamada sensei and Tohei sensei. And I can't quite remember who the other one was. And I'm standing there and Kevin says, to say, oh, this guy would like to join. And sensei goes, oh, okay, fine. And then I say, but you're having a seminar. And he goes, yeah, that's fine. Well, maybe I shouldn't start in the seminar. Whatever you want to do, but I'd like to start. Whatever you want to do. So then Tohei sensei goes, takes this shot of scotch, slams his cup down on the table and says, okay, it's time for my class. And he goes out. Well, he goes on the mat and he proceeds to just beat the hell out of Bruce Bookman. I mean, just destroy this. I'd never seen anything like this. We were doing little rolls and stuff like that in California, but I'd never seen anything like somebody flying through the air and the sweat and the grime and everything. And then after the demonstration with Bruce, then Bruce proceeds to go to this guy and just completely destroy him. He was right in front of me. Looked like a nice guy, but he just flattened him. And then I was just thinking like, Jesus Christ, what the hell is this place, But I had liked Aikido, so I ended up coming back and that was it. Anyway.
And you, Steve?
Well, I came in a kind of roundabout way. I'd been studying theater in London, and we had a like a stage fighting class, a stunt class, and the guy that taught it actually was using some of the roles, some of the ukemi that we, I didn't know that at the time, but I thought, wow, this guy did a great job. You could really roll safely and fall because, his orientation was to do all, not like the little fencing stuff that you used to see in plays, but he was used to working in movies and, so his fight stuff was like the old Errol Flynn type stuff where, you used swords, you grabbed lamps, whatever it was. So I asked him one time, we went out for a drink at the pub and I said, how did you come up with this, this method of falling safely? And he said, well, I studied this martial art, Aikido, and that's where I got it from. And it just stuck in my mind. I never pursued it after that. And when I came back to the States and was doing some work in the city, actually teaching some of those classes, which the theater schools weren't doing over here. They were still doing the old fencing stuff. And I managed to teach a class at NYU Theater School. And as it was going on, I said, I really should try to improve my skills. So I opened up the Yellow Pages and the New York Aikikai was the first listing on there. I went down and to observe a class. And when I got in there, I'd never seen people having so much fun, tossing themselves around and still laughing and carrying on. And that was it. I signed up right away and been there ever since. But it was, I think, we can all agree, it was pretty, as fun as it looked from the outside, it was a pretty tough place for a beginner. It was certainly not the most hospitable. I think everybody's got their own stories there.
Yeah, but I think we have to sort of clear up one little thing. We all arrived in the same year. Actually, I arrived in the beginning of '74, and I think you, Steve, you came in May.
Yeah.
And Peter maybe in the fall sometime?
I think it was, yeah, fall.
Yeah.
But actually, for the three of us, Robert was the mutual friend. he befriended each of us.
I had no
Yeah,
friends when I first went in there. I'd go in the class and I'd try to talk to somebody, and these were people that knew each other for a long time, and it was like I felt as if no one talked to me. Then I'd go on the mat and they would just crunch me, and I was like, I don't know, what's that technique? Jesus, that hurts, or whatever, and they would just laugh, do it again, and I just would kind of wander around and not talk to anybody. And then one day I was over by the water fountain, and Robert came over and said, hey, blah, 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 you're new here, what's your name? I'm Robert, and blah, blah, blah. And we hit it off immediately. And I was like, oh my God, there's a real nice person here. And then I met Steve, and everything just kind of grew from there,
Yeah, I know. And the place that I think Steve alluded to it before, but the New York Aikikai, had this mixture of all these different types of people. And it was this one word that I can think of. In certain respects, it was chaotic. I mean, as far as the teaching schedule was concerned, you had the morning class, which 4 days a week, weekdays, was taught by Lukman Hakim, who we just lost this year. And the other day, the fifth day, was Sensei's morning class, Tuesday morning. And when he was away traveling, Jane Ozeki would teach it. And then you get to the afternoon class, which was at 1 p.m. And when I joined, I was unemployed. I wasn't a samurai yet. I was an unemployed samurai. And but the afternoon class was taught by a few people. One of them was this guy, Kiyoshi Tokunaga, a very sweet guy. He really nice Aikido. I think it was a Nidan at that point. He taught a couple of classes in the afternoon. Another guy was called Steve Perlman. He was an actor, and every time he would teach you something, or if you called him over, like, how is that done, Sensei? How is that done? He'd say, well, I don't know. It's he kind of like deny the fact that he really knew more than you. He was a Nidan too. And he'd sort of say, yeah, I kind of follow what I did, but you'll figure it out. He was kind of wondering why he was there in the first place. And you'd see him every now and then on TV or on movies as like a sergeant in some cop show or cop movie or something like that. He pretty much got those parts all the time. And then we'd get a guy, some other people who are kind of odd, and I think Steve will describe Martin Dahl, who was an every now and then teacher. And then in the evening class, pretty much the schedule was Sensei. But if he was out of town, and he was a lot, he was teaching all over the country and all over the world, as he does now. And we'd line up on I guess it was like the east wall of the dojo, like a big long line. We don't do that now, but like the 5:30 evening class, and all these people were primarily 9 to 5 people, and we would line up, and 5:30 would come and go, and nobody would get up to teach. Sensei was out of town, and we'd hear voices would sort of come out from the line. Sibylla, you want to teach? And she'd say, no. Klaus, you want to teach? Every now and then he'd teach, but he said, no. Everybody wanted to train. They didn't want to teach. So typically, someone that you really didn't want to teach would jump up. Take it from there, Steve, for instance.
Well, not, I would, at least for the beginning, because I was always a morning person ever since I was a little kid. I used to, in the TV days before you had 24-hour TV, the stations would start at 6 a.m. and, they play the national anthem and everything. But before 6 a.m., there was just a test pattern on the TV. And I was up at like 5 a.m., but I would be sitting there watching the test pattern until. So anyway, that's the morning was my preference there, and I was working. My job was at night. I was actually working at a bagel shop, very famous bagel shop, for a long time, and then, and just as an aside, I would have people from the dojo come in there, and in their loudest voice goes, "Hey, Steve, any free bagels?"
That
the
was Rocky.
manager would come out from behind to see what was going on. But so I started in the morning. I didn't know exactly what was going on at the dojo at that time, but it was the morning class was a pretty rough class, and maybe even more forbidding than the others. And I show up one morning, and of course, once again at that time when we all lined up, if you were a beginner, everybody turned to bow to somebody else. So you'd be stuck there, and if there was another beginner, that's who you worked with. So it was tough. You really got nowhere. It took a long time for people to see you come every day and then finally accept you. So I show up for that first morning class, and the guy sitting next to me was not happy because there was nobody else to bow to except me. And, like I said, I just joined there. Well, this guy started to trash me all over the place. And my head is bouncing on the mat because, yeah, I knew how to roll a little bit, but not with somebody really throwing you and, and meaning it. And, I'm there, my head is smashing against, the back of the mat. And Lukeman comes over, the teacher, and I'm going, oh my God, thank God the teacher is coming over. Lukeman proceeds to pick me up and slam me even harder than the guy before. So that was that was my introduction to the morning class. So it was wild for a while there, and I think when our little group started to kind of coalesce and we started to become friends, and of course Butch Chernovsky was part of that group as well, and we had a great group of women who were part of the group as well. Gina Zarilli, Chris Vargin, Marianne, Lynn Sonneman, Cheryl, and these are our spouses now. It just coalesced as a group, and I don't know. It was almost like we had a college class there. Everybody was doing everything together. We would go on seminars together with Sensei as a group, and everybody was just excited to be there and do stuff. And I think Sensei saw that it was an opportunity to maybe, get the dojo act together. He had some people who really wanted to help out and take care of the building, maybe help him teach in the future. So I really don't know where I'm going with this, but the group was together, and we would have, well, let's get into the Yankee Stadium story. We had one wealthy guy there. We were all struggling, and he got us ticket. He got a whole group section at the Yankee game, and we told Sensei was a Yankee fan. He was going to go, and we had to leave to catch the subway there. And Sensei started the 5:30 class, and all of a sudden, 20 minutes into the class, Sensei tells somebody else to take over. He leaves the mat, and then 10 of us leave the mat at the same time. And everybody's going, what is going on here? But so that was not a very nice thing, but that's how it worked. And, we all got on the D train and headed up to Yankee Stadium. And we had a great time. And then I'm going to turn this over to one of you two guys to do the attack.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to remember it as well as you. Why don't you go on?
All right, I'll tell the story from my perspective.
Go ahead.
We were, I guess, needless to say, we had a lot of beer inside of us, and we were enjoying the game, including Gina Zerilli getting up on her seat and yelling, "Come on, Bucky!" She loved Bucky Dent. That was her hero. Typical Gina. She had to, make all of us part of that. And some of us were pretty drunk at the end of the game, and we're leaving the game, and we started to sort of horse around and say, "All right, get Steve," and we run out and start pushing him around. We're going down the ramps in Yankee Stadium, the endless ramps. We must have been sitting way up, I guess. Okay, get Peter, blah 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 blah. So everybody jumps on Peter and stuff like that. Start horsing around with him. So we get down to the ground floor, so to speak, and out of the stadium when someone says, I think it was me.
It was you.
I said, let's get Sensei. And I start running towards Sensei, and apparently nobody was running after me to join me.
No.
They figured that was it,
Yeah, we said, let's go. And then Robert went.
So I jumped Sensei, put my arm around his neck, and grabbed him, and all of a sudden, within a split second, I felt myself going over the top in a classic Koshinage, and I was on the concrete. I even slapped out like an idiot, and I guess it became legend. Chris Varjan, I remembered she ran over to a vendor who was selling soda and hot dogs, and she got some ice to put it on my elbow, and that was that. Stuff of legend. Unfortunately, it was not a great legend for me.
From our perspective in the back, when you were saying that, hey, let's go get Sensei, and we'll go, oh yeah. And then you turn and run, and we just all look at each other and stop, We watch you go grab him. There's hundreds of people. This is packed. Everybody's walking out of Yankee Stadium. Robert grabs him. Sensei flips him. The people parted like it was the Nile, it was like, like that. And everybody in the crowd is like, what the hell,
Yeah, for about a second.
Yeah.
And then typical New Yorkers, they just went about their business,
Right, that was New York, but Sensei said to me, Sensei did say something. He looks at me, he bends over, looks at me down on the ground and says, "Oh, Robert, I didn't know that was you."
Well, yeah, we had some interesting times like that.
It reminds me of we all have these stories with Sensei, right? And as the years going on, we're all doing ukemi and everything with him, and all these cool events that we did. But I remember the first time he ever called me up for ukemi in the dojo. I must have been like third kyu or something. And he had crawled, Bruce and Ricky and Angel, whoever. And then he called me up, and I was shocked. And I go up, I kind of stumble up there. I go and I grab his wrist, and my legs started shaking so much that I grabbed his wrist and I just collapsed in front of him. And standing over me, looking down at me like this, the whole place just erupts laughing at me. And Sensei just says, go sit down. And so I'm like beet red, I'm just so, and I go over, sit down again. He didn't call me for about another 3 months, but next time I was better. But the first time didn't start out that good.
Well, yeah, but you became his favorite uke, Peter.
That's right.
That was not a very auspicious start, I'll tell you that.
It wasn't, but in all deference, sir, nobody took ukemi like you.
That's correct.
So that was he Sensei loved that.
Yeah. two hip replacements later, we can, we all took a toll from this over the years. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, yeah. But trying to think of a like I said, we had a bunch of characters there. I mean, we could jump back and forth, guys, because another group story was we had gone up. We were going with Sensei up to he had a seminar in Toronto, and then was going to Syracuse after that. And we said we wanted to go with him, but we couldn't fly with him, so we rented a van. And back, what are we talking about, guys? About 1981, maybe 82.
Because Peter was in Florida already.
It was before I went to Florida.
Really?
76, 77.
Yeah, maybe.
No, I think we were black belts by then. Must have been 79, maybe.
Maybe
77,
like
yeah.
that.
like
We
that.
got a black belt in 77. Showed
Oh, right. It could have been 78, 79. But anyway, it was tough to rent a van. There weren't many vans, especially in New York City. But we managed to get like one of these 9 or 10 passenger vans. And, I don't know how to read a map. So I look at a map and, I measure it like this and I go, oh, from Toronto to Syracuse, it's only that much. We should be able to get there easily overnight. And so we drive up to Toronto, and what was his name was Bill Collins, right?
Collins, yeah. And he had
And
a
he,
spotter.
and he owned a racehorse, right? So after Rob, I don't think you were on this trip.
No, I wasn't there.
So after classes, we went to the racetrack. He had a box there, and we watched the races, and then our plan was to go back, get a couple hours sleep, and then leave, almost in the middle of the night, right, Peter?
Yeah.
And it was freezing up there. It was the winter. So we we get ourselves together, and there was, I don't know how many, it was me, you, was Butch along on that one?
There.
Cheryl was there, and Lynn and Gina and Chris
Yeah.
was there too, I think. And so anyway, we start off, and right away, the van, the heat broke. We had no heat in the van.
But I don't think it broke. It was because of the cardboard, wasn't it?
No, we put the cardboard in to try to stop the wind from coming in while we were driving.
I thought it was that it was so cold that it overpowered the heater, and we were freezing. And then a guy at a truck stop told us to put cardboard in the front.
Right.
Then it worked again.
Right. But anyway, it was freezing, and everybody was getting sick on this drive to Syracuse. And when we finally got to Syracuse, everybody was sick, including Sensei. We were all shivering, sneezing, and we had no cell phones at that time. So we stopped at a payphone to try to get in touch. It must have been Arif or Yusuf
Yeah.
at that time
Yeah.
at Syracuse. And we couldn't reach anybody. We didn't have a phone number. We just had the address of the dojo. So Sensei goes, we got to go home. We got to go home because we're all sick. So we found I think maybe we even used the cardboard that was trying to block the wind from coming in. We just wrote it was a handwritten note saying, sorry, we're all sick. YYN students, and left it at the dojo and went home. But, and I think we were all like sick for almost 2 weeks after that.
Well, we almost died in the van, actually, because we're going and it was like so cold. You know how you get that kind of like crystally like mist? It looked like we were going through some kind of, insane, fantasy kingdom of some sort. Snow everywhere, freezing as hell. Your lights could hardly see ahead of you. At one point I was driving and I'm just freezing to death. I think you might have been sitting next to me at that time, Steve, kind of half nodding off in frigidness. Everybody in the back had made a teepee out of themselves. They had all put on top of each other and put their coats and gis and everything. It looked like a fucking igloo back there. It was like, and I really thought we'd never come out of it. I thought we were driving into oblivion. There was.
Who sent me the wish you were here card?
The what?
The wish you were here card that you get when people go on road trips or vacations. Wish you were here, sunny Syracuse. Just a joke.
Butch must have sent it.
Yeah. Oh God.
But I mean, yes, there were certainly crazy incidences like that. But at that time, also the USAF, the Federation, was just gelling, coming in there, and Sensei put all of us to work because he wanted a newsletter to go out. And once again, nobody had, we had no money. There was practically no budget there. And we got some articles from some people, but it was it was like the same story, only you substituted the name of the city. We had a great seminar and the food was terrific, and that was the story. And we would have to put the newsletter together at the place where you were working, Pete, as a graphic designer.
Yeah, at the hub.
At the hub. And we could only get in there at night. So we had to go in after everybody left. And, we were busy with the typewriters, and you were, at that time, we had to put stuff together with paste. You actually had to put whatever you were printing together, cut out the copy and cut out the pictures and paste it all together. And I forget what the point of the thing was. Oh, and eventually we went, we would, be fooling around there as well. And we went to Sensei and say, Sensei, would you mind if we put a humor page in there? We'll make it the last page. And, Sensei said, sure, go ahead. So we always took that last page and did some really wacky stuff. Actually, we called it Wacky Waza.
Yeah.
And we had great illustrations by Lynn, insane articles that nobody
You wrote them.
Well, I wrote them, and we all laughed at them, but I don't know how they went over in the rest of the country when people got them.
Remember,
but that was, that was typical of Sensei's attitude, that if you came up and he would let you do a lot of stuff, just like he gives people tremendous latitude when they're practicing.
Right.
you know, as long as you did what you were supposed to be doing, he gave you enough rope to hang yourself, I guess.
Yeah,
I think
and
we
that's, go ahead, Peter.
before it started with Lynn's first cartoon was something along the lines of, oh, the Midwest people, you know, some
Oh,
practice very and
yeah.
then it was something like the California people wear tie-dye gis, and in New York we just kill, you know. And I remember like all the freaking Californian people and everything, they were like, who the fuck do you think you are? Blah, 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 you know. Humor almost destroyed the whole federation before it even started, you know.
You know, Steve, you bring up something which, you know, can't be emphasized enough about Sensei, about giving us the latitude. I mean, obviously, even on the mat, you know, to develop in the way, you know, as you said, doing the basics correctly. He's a, you know, obviously an extraordinary teacher, but the latitude to develop, you know, on our own to, you know, our brand, whatever that means, of Aikido, each individual. And he also was very, very aware. He knew all his students, and I'm not just talking about the New York Aikikai, students he see repeatedly, whether around the country, around the world. He knew exactly the way each of these people did Shihonage, Kodegaish. It's absolutely remarkable how anybody can really can do all that. But one of the things that you pointed out was the humor part, how he accepted so much stuff. And I'm thinking of one, and it trickled down, you know, to some of us anyway. Some of us had a sense of humor, including Harvey Konigsberg. And it brings me back to a day that you all remember. It was April 1st, which we all know is April Fool's Day. And you'll fill in some of the details, but what I remember was someone coming up with the idea when Harvey Konigsberg, his typical warm-up, I believe was on a Saturday morning, am I right?
Saturday morning class.
He goes through a whole bunch of things, back rolls, small rolls, large rolls, you know, all his, and he sort of belted out in his gravelly voice. So we came up with the idea of responding to one of those calls, so that when Harvey, you know, again in the warm up of, you know, to his class, yelled small rolls, about 8 or 10 of us took small rolls out of our gis, actual rolls, and rolled them or threw them at Harvey. And I forget the expression on his face. For a second, I mean a split second, he looked, he couldn't understand what's happening. Then after that split second, he burst out into laughter. Did we yell April Fools?
I think we did.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure we did. We were
Did you
very
know,
relieved.
do you know whose idea it was, Steve?
I remember talking about it with Butch, and because we both of us went out that morning to the local bakery to buy the rolls for everybody. And, you know, we were going, geez, what if he doesn't say small rolls today of all the days, right? We're all going to be practicing with, you know, these rolls in our gi and the crumbs falling down our pants. And, you know, we had to get through the whole first part of that warm up. And, you know, just one of those gags that worked out. And, you know, but, you know, we knew Harvey had a great sense of humor about it. And, you know,
I'll tell you someone, go ahead, sorry.
no, go ahead, Rob.
I'll tell you someone who didn't have the same, what do you remember about it, Peter?
I just remember that he did his warm up first, and we all had these gis tucked into I all had these rolls tucked into our gis, and mine was just crumbling apart because, you know, you over to stretch and this and that. So I had all these things falling down into my pants, and it was like I'd look around me, and there were like little crumbs of of rolls all around you guys too, you know. I'm going, Jesus, I wish he'd get us to stand up so we can throw the fucking rolls.
And, you know,
using those words.
and the reaction after Harvey recovered, and I don't want to get into too much details about how many people used to throw me off the mat, But Harvey's reaction after he left was, Robert, get off that. Immediately thinking I had my idea, but it wasn't. In any case, I'll tell you about somebody who, I don't know if you remember this bit, who didn't have the same kind of sense of humor as maybe we did. And that was Lookman, who was a wonderful teacher. But in the morning class one day, Lookman used to come over, and the only way to point to sort of describe it, he would schmooze with everybody. He'd kind of cross his arms, come over to you and start talking about anything, gossiping, all sorts of things. And I happened to have the stupidity to tell him that in last night's class, Angel Alvarez called me up to do a kemi for Yonkyo. And not only was it for those techniques over and over again, but then for another version of Yonkyo after that, and boy, did my wrists hurt. So of course, what did Lookman do? He calls me up to demonstrate Yonkyo. His sense of humor. But that was the morning class.
Oh, God.
What was the morning class?
One other thing I remember from that Wacky Waza, the cartoons that we made, Steve came up with this idea that at that time there was only a couple books out, and Doshu had one of them, I think.
Yeah.
And these foot patterns that you would follow, like, time you would do this, your foot goes here. So you would kind of watch the foot pattern to do the technique, And Steve made one of those, but halfway through he put in another foot. So it was like you're trying to figure out the freaking technique, and all of a sudden there's like, anyway, it just you had to kind of visually see it, but it ended up with all these feet, another great cartoon by Lynn Sonneman,
That's right.
That was pretty funny.
One of the speaking of that morning, I don't know if do you guys remember, we had a guy, there were several characters there, of course. There was a guy who Butch used to call the Crab Man. And he only walked sideways. He would come into the dojo, he would come up and work his way like this back into the dressing room, and then come out here. It was a very, very...
He would do it along the wall.
Yes, along the wall.
Yeah,
very,
I remember.
Very, very strange. And he also didn't like to take ukemi. So he shows up one morning, and at that morning class, James Keller was there. And James gets stuck with this guy at one end of the mat, and I'm working out with Butch on the other end of the mat, and we're going, wow, this should be interesting. And as we're working out of the corner of my eye, I see this body going almost up to the ceiling and then splat down. James had just had it with this guy. Instead of trying to throw him in a technique, he just picked him up straight, flopped down.
Hey, Peter, I don't know if you remember this, but it's another James story. But it was in a class that you were teaching. And I'm working out with James, and we were friends, and not as close as we became later on, but we considered all the three of us each other friends, and we're doing kotegaish, ski kotegaish. So it was one of those situations where I'm punching, I'm the uke, and no, I'm sorry, he's punching, and as I go in to do a tenkan, basic kotegaish and ski kotegaish, he punches me in the ribs. And it's one of those things where you say, well, he knows what I'm going to do, or is it, am I doing the tenkan correctly? But I didn't process all that stuff all at once. All I know is every time I'm doing it, I'm getting this incredible punch in the rib. This guy, you know, as we all know, is so strong, it's ridiculous. So what do? I'm getting really pissed off. So when he comes in at one point, you know, just to do the regular ski at the beginning, I smack him in the face. Not punch him in the face, smack him like a idiot. So I see this look on his face and everything's changing. It's beginning, you know, it's like James turning into one of those monsters, which he was, but Peter sees it at the same time. And, you know, like I said, he was friendly with both of us. So he does the rational thing. He throws me off the mat. He says, Robert, I think you better leave. And the fact is, it was rational because he knew that I'd probably be a dead human being the next few minutes if James really got going. Do you remember that, Peter?
Yeah, when you just said the end of it, then I remember it. Yeah.
So one more time I was thrown off the mat, but there were several other times. It was a kind of a theme. I don't know why. I don't know what it is about me that wanted people to throw me off the mat.
Well, you know, you mentioned James Keller, and I love Butch's thing. You know, his description of James was somebody who didn't have any space between their molecules. Incredibly dense, strong.
No, that's Peter
Yeah.
came up with that. It was
What?
I came up with that because it was from a Superman episode on TV where they gave the explanation of some scientist said that the reason he was so strong was because his molecules were so close together. So that's what I said about James. And here's the funny thing. When we all shared the same chiropractor, Lou Savas.
Savas, yeah.
Right? Who just would, I mean, he was the old school, crack him up, you know, there would be screams from his office. You know, you're in the waiting room and you hear, like that. And then you go,
Those are ballet dancers.
Maybe we should go. But so when I went to see Lou one time, he said, oh, your friend James was just here. And I said, you know, Lou, I have this theory that, you know, because Lou said, I can barely move this guy's muscles. And I said, you know, I have a theory, Lou, that it's because his molecules are so close together. And Lou Savas goes, maybe you're right.
Who actually practiced Aikido before us?
Yeah, I think he did. He did practice with
One
Sensei.
of the original members. His name is on in the incorporation papers.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, one time I went up to see him because I had something was not right. And Harvey or somebody sent me up to see him. And I always had, since I was 18, I had this broken wrist. It doesn't bend backwards. A bone had fused in there. So I go into Lou's office and he looks at my wrist and he goes, oh, this isn't moving. And before I could say anything, he broke my goddamn wrist, you know? And it was like, kind of goes, you know, oh, well, you know, it'll be better. The thing swelled up the size of a basketball and I was off the mat for quite a while. I broke it a few times, but.
Well, that's a perfect story. That's a perfect, even the people that weren't at the dojo at that time were crazy if they had been there at one time.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Do you remember that actor, that guy, Jerry? He was, again,
yeah.
He was more unemployed than employed, but he was an actor. He was one of the really strange characters back then.
Yeah, definitely. Was just kind of, I always wondered what was going on with him. No matter who he was practicing with, if there were people watching, he always made sure he was facing the audience, no matter what he was doing.
Hey, Steve, how about that time with Doshu?
Oh, yes, yes.
What do you
So
dojo?
at that time, Butch and I were in the office, and I forget, it was late morning. The phone rings, and Butch picks it up and says, what did he say? Yeah, and I'm the king of Siam. And he hangs up the phone. I said, who was that? And he said, oh, some guy called, said he's Doshu. And we figured, yeah, it was a gag. The phone rings again, and he picks it up. And then I see the expression on his face change. And he goes, it is Doshu. And what happened was Sensei happened to be away in Japan at this time, but Doshu and Yamaguchi Sensei and Shibata Sensei were traveling to South America, and they stopped at JFK, and there was a big delay on their flight, and I think they didn't know that Sensei wasn't here, so they called up because they wanted Sensei to come meet them at the airport and take them back to the dojo where they could wait for their flight. So Butch and we called one of the members who had a car in the city, and we went to pick them up at the airport. We didn't even know. I mean, the only thing we had was the picture of Doshu that was hanging in the dojo. We went to pick them up. Shibata spoke a little bit of English,
Yeah.
but not much. So it was a really weird scene. We took them back to the dojo. Everybody was looking around, and then finally we took them back. But it doesn't have a big ending to it. But it was a pretty funny story.
Yeah, I think wasn't it the line that Butch said, yeah, and I'm the mayor of New York?
Yeah, right. Something like that.
Something like that. You know?
But, yeah, it was some pretty crazy times.
Jerry, you forgot to mention, I think, one thing that Jerry did, unless you don't want to talk about that. Not only did he look at the audience, so to speak, when he was practicing Aikido, since he was, I guess, an aspiring actor, he was also really weird, but in a kind of a semi-dangerous way. I think didn't he stalk?
Yeah.
Stalk who?
Sensei.
He stalked Sensei.
He would hang out outside his house, I think, and sort of, look up, and Sensei would see him hanging out. I don't know if he threatened him at any point, did he? Jared, did you remember
I don't remember, but it was a lot of trouble with him.
Right. To get him to stop. Yeah.
Listen, we at some point we woke up to the New York Post headline of somebody plotting to blow up the Statue of Liberty.
Oh, yes.
And here on the picture was one of our members.
Yes.
Nobody knew. So Sensei's been through a lot of stuff there, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I know we could probably go on and on and on here, but I think we need to give people a break from from this story at this point. So if anybody wants to wrap up here, from my perspective, the dojo has been around for so long, and there are so many stories of people coming through, and every group has their own story, and I guess every group kind of feels like they have a special connection. But I always look back at that time. It was a time and a place. The serendipity of all of us coming together there, and Aikido just coming into its own, and the fact that we've, you know, still remained close friends. You know, really, it's been the central part of our lives for what, we're almost going on 50 years now.
Yeah. You know, you guys became my best friends, you know? And it was, I always kind of looked at it as almost a golden time, golden age at New York Aikikai. You had Angel and Harvey and Harry and Luke Kleinsmith and Luke Mon and, you know, Rocky. And then we were the young pups coming up, and we were just a bunch of dojo rats. That's all we wanted to do was to hang out and do this. And we've kept, you know, this incredible friendship, with Sensei being the glue of it all over all of these years, you know? And it's a, you know, you look back on it and it's such a rich life, you know? And I guess something about Aikido, breaking down all the inhibitions between us, you just become really close with people. And it's a treasure, you know, what we have with each other is a treasure. And it's a wonderful thing, you know?
Yeah, I remember when I first started, as I mentioned, I went to the afternoon class, and then I joined Steve in the morning class, and both he and I lived like on a line on the Upper West Side, you know, I guess several miles from the dojo. And I used to have to drive to work, which was out of town. So I'd pick up Steve I was on 88th Street, he was on 74th Street.
Yeah, 74th.
I'd pick him up on the way down to the morning class. And you know, that's how I guess friendships like kind of deepen, you know, off the mat and on the mat. I mean, obviously we had that group that was doing things together, but I'd pick them up every day, and then we'd, you know, we'd take class, and then I'd rush off to Westchester County to work, and then I rush back to take half the 5:30 class, and then all this. So we were, as Peter said, dojo rats. I mean, we had our friendships there. We did all that wonderful work, if you could call it that, for Sensei. We loved every bit of it, whether it was the newsletter, USAF, or, you know, going on trips with him. It was a wonderful life. It was a golden time, as both of you said. And, you know, it's just great to be with you here today, that we're still friends. You know, it's wonderful.